hello everyone. I'm Erik Olofsson. I'm the founder and creative director at Erik's Curiosa.
Hey all sorcerers, Root here, and welcome back to the archives. I am here today with a very special episode. As you know, one of the things that's really important to me is sharing the experience of our different community members, and I have a really important community member with us here today. So I'm here with Erik. Erik, I was wondering if you could introduce yourself to the viewers and tell us a little bit about who you are and your role in sorcery.
Yes, so hello everyone. I'm Erik Olofsson. I'm the founder and creative director at Erik's Curiosa. And then after that, I was supposed to, my background.
Your background, yeah.
Yeah, okay. So I'm a lifelong gamer, if I start from the very beginning, and that includes playing Magic and computer games like Diablo, StarCraft, that kind of thing. And when it comes to TCGs, I used to be quite a competitive player, playing. I like deck building and especially Draft was a favorite of mine. So sorcery, the idea of that came up both from collecting and playing old school Magic, and also just a general game design interest, and collecting of hand painted old school art, where I had actually commissioned some artists from like early 90s Magic artists, just to have pretty pieces on the wall, basically. And then sort of an idea started to gnaw at the back of my head about like, maybe you can actually make this into a game. And it was very much a sort of MTG clone in the beginning, but it had the kind of old school aesthetic to it.
Yeah, what year was that where you started to really work through that process?
2016 probably.
Wow.
It's 16, 17, so well before the pandemic. And I talked to various people, and one of the people I talked to was Nick, my co-designer, extremely early on, and so I visited him in the US, and he had this sort of game system that he had been tinkering with, which was the square grid system, and we played a test game of that, and he had a sort of proto version of the Pudge Butcher and also a Cloud City. So we did like hooking thing and like floating minions around.
So really thinking early on about how you can use the spatial element to really add to the gameplay and make it more immersive and engaging, and also more interactive too.
Yeah, so it's that early version, while very crude in a way, but you could see that there was some extremely fun interactions that would happen there that I hadn't seen in any other TCG. So it was kind of, I would say that's when the game kind of became a complete game in itself, because it had both the sort of atmosphere and aesthetic, and then also gameplay elements that were very fresh and its own identity as well.
Yeah, so it sounds like it really stemmed from just a personal passion of yours to create these really cool art pieces, and then kind of turned into a game that you are playing with some of your close friends and your co-developer. And at what point did you decide to want to take it to that next level and turn it into something that you could share with other people?
Well, so the next step was I created these 4 playtest decks, so that's just one for each element. And I brought them with me, playing to people here and there. and sort of changing the cards as I played them, and like watching people, seeing what they kind of struggled with.
Yeah.
And in the beginning, the games were really long. Like the square grid was something it was like 7 by, maybe it was 7 by 7.
Okay.
I think it started out as.
Wow.
So you could go backwards with your avatar and so on. But the games were just it's like 2-hour games.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
so the playing field kept shrinking, and I introduced a lot of cards to try to get to the opponent quicker. So you had like Void Walk minions, cards like Polar Bears, so you have to sort of keep your back rank.
So not only
safe.
creating a card that forces the opponent to think defensively, but also giving you offensive opportunities to move around the other side as well.
Yes, exactly. And the game just kept improving. One of the big improvements so at this point I was also commissioning more and more art because I had more and more card ideas that felt solid enough to do fully. And then there was another kind of big leap forward in the game design when I went to Seattle actually, and I showed it to a couple of old Magic MTG designers. Matt Place was one of them. So I had a contact through Grinding Gear Games, which was the computer game company I was working at the time. So up until this point, it's sort of purely a side project. But from when playing it there, we realized that the sites had to be kind of vastly simplified, because the sites up until that point, there was a lot of things that, for example, permanently like +1 power to, or +1 defense power to all minions nearby, and so, and then you could also, your opponent could have like -1 attack on the first attack this turn as well. So you had a lot of sort of permanent sites that you had to
like those passive abilities that
you had to keep track on everything. So one of the big things Matt brought up at that point was to sort of vastly simplify things. And one of the most clear places you can see that would be that a lot of sites have Genesis abilities. So you have quite a strong ability when you play them, but then after that you kind of, if you have a site with 3 minions on, like you don't have to like constantly lift them up to look at what's
so
written.
Kind of giving you that powerful effect once, but then allowing that to fade, so you don't have to keep track every turn of every single site that you're going to be monitoring.
And then we keep, if we have sites that have reoccurring effects, then that's usually at unique, so you can't have that many. And also when we have sites like that, you make it so that the onus to remember is on the player that actually plays the site, instead of the opponent having to sort of keep track on your stuff and sort of getting a feel bad by forgetting and so on. So
I think that's a really important point as well, and something that we were discussing at Gen Con, but some of the other larger events, in terms of whose burden is it to really keep track of, say, threshold or other elements of play, and really trying to find that balance, because there's, I think, a potentially negative emotional experience if, like, oh, I forgot to, do X, Y, or Z. But if it's something that you're keeping track of for your opponent, the feeling could be much worse. So it's really encouraging to hear that there's a lot of genuine intent behind those design decisions to make sure that the players are keeping track of their own things, and hopefully, not having to put that burden on the other person.
Yeah, so triggered abilities is one of those things where we try to do that. But and after that, some short time after that, I also realized, or someone pointed out to me, that why aren't sites landscape format? Like, and In hindsight, it just seems so obvious because then you can see the sights and the minions at the same time, and you don't just have a train of like cards on top of each other when they obscure each other. So that meant sort of redoing, I think it was 11 pieces of art or something that had to be redone. This is one of the earliest sites.
So was Water Castle one of the ones that survived that, and kind of a throwback to the way the original design intent was?
So yeah, Water Castle was a site that was designed to be, well, it was commissioned before that change. Okay. And I also have versions of all the villages and all the towers that were that way to start with. But yeah, it's one of those things. It really helps gameplay and visibility and landscapes. Well, there's a reason why landscape paintings are in landscape format. Like it just looks so much better.
Yeah,
so,
and I think the immersion as well. You know, thinking about the design intent in terms of the way that you word card abilities. Very intentional use of language to create an internal narrative that you can imagine playing out. And having those landscapes there, I think also, for me at least, gives me the perspective of roaming over the desert or moving through the woods, and the orientation of the card I think really helps with that, to separate it from the more active abilities of the minions and things that are traversing the board.
Yeah, and also we had the two different decks, so it helps separate those decks from each other as well. So, yeah. Yeah.
What year was that when you ended up going to Seattle to really focus on those changes?
So, 2018, I think it was.
Okay. So about 2 years down the pipe of developing, play testing, and
something like maybe a year or so. So it was like 2016. It was my first game that wasn't really a game, and then 2017 probably we had Nick's square grid system, and then 2018 the sort of some professional game designer input at that time. Yeah.
So at that point, it sounds like you're getting more serious about it, really thinking about making this into something that you can share with a large amount of people. When did you make that decision to then transition to the Kickstarter, to open things up for folks to start to show their support of the game and show their interest in wanting to play it?
Yeah, well, it was at that time I kind of knew that we were on to something really good and fun. So then it became a bit of a time scramble to get it out to Kickstarter, because we had, at the time, the pandemic hit and TCGs had a sort of meteoric rise. So, and with the Kickstarter, we kind of knew that we had to get the game out before things changed drastically. But it also sort of created deadlines and things that we were forced to take it to the next step.
Yeah, so
quickly.
Realizing that perfection is something that may not be achievable in the conventional sense, but the time was right and it was important to really push forward and kind of make that vision that you'd had previously reality because of the kind of the zeitgeist as it would be.
Yeah, so in the lead up to the Kickstarter, I started to post things on this Facebook page, and that was when a lot of the cards are sort of just Photoshop mock-ups, and like it sort of looked like a way more complete game than it was at that point, and it attracted a lot of attention still, and attracted a lot of very talented people as well that helped with it. So Simon came on then to help with the Kickstarter, for example.
Yeah. How does it feel to look back and reflect on where you were at and that vision that you had, and then to see all of that interest from everyone else wanting to support what you were trying to build? I can imagine that's a pretty complex set of emotions to really think about when you take something that's just a conceptual part of your thought process and actually turning it into a physical thing that other people can enjoy.
Yeah, well, I could see from people's reactions that it was really sort of hitting the right spot you could say.
Yeah.
And then, well, it's just remarkable. People messaging, wanting to help.
Yeah.
So
I can imagine too, mentioning your early interest in Magic and a lot of the fantasy art that was kind of completed by folks who now have joined the team. I can imagine it's a really overwhelming experience to see all these really impressive folks that probably had a very huge impact on your younger self wanting to be part of something that you've developed.
Oh yeah, with artists specifically, yeah. It's kind of a strange situation where you have these artists from an era where you get computer games come and sort of absolutely take over, and you get digital art that is sort of faster and more efficient to do, and everyone sort of switches to that. But then there's this element of this creative element that sort of gets forgotten, and there's a lot of artists that I guess you get some sort of critical mass. I get a few artists on first, and then I can sort of create nice mock-ups and sort of explain things better, and then I can sort of get even sort of bigger names on because they like what they see and what they hear about the project.
So almost like the card Snowball.
Yeah, you get the snowballing effect there, and you get similar things throughout. With community as well, and just on the business side too. It's like, I don't know, you manage to make something good, and then it attracts even more good things, I guess.
Yeah. And being a player on the opposite side of that, seeing that growth from the beginning and where the game started in its alpha state and now progressing into Arthurian Legends, it's been incredible to watch. One of the things that is really important to me, and the channel focuses a lot on, as I'd mentioned, is community building and being in a space with like-minded individuals who just really enjoy having fun over a fun game. What's it been like being able to watch the community respond to the game, especially seeing that really incredible growth with Alpha and now into Arthurian Legends?
Well, it's a strange feeling. So actually, to continue on a bit, you would be a good example also of someone that, like many of the Sorcery community members and players, they are a little bit older and they sort of have established careers, often kids, but they still take the time out of their, like they put time for Sorcery and for tournaments in their already busy lives. So that obviously you have a good thing going if you have all these kind of people like that thinks it's sort of important enough for their time and their effort. So it's extremely fascinating to see.
Yeah, really thinking about time as the ultimate currency, that the thing that we choose to invest time into is more of a currency than maybe buying a pack of cards, etc. You can never get more time. So choosing to spend time in a life that has a lot of competing priorities doing this particular thing means it must be really important to you.
Yes. Well, here's one example of that like this project is an example of that because it uses, I like game design, I like art, I like TCG collecting, and I have a very entrepreneurship. I would maybe even say that I'm an entrepreneur first, sort of as a sort of personal identity question.
Yeah, so it's really like building things and supporting them.
Yes, exactly. There's always a sort of a project in my mind for sort of thinking in the future about cool things that can be done and doing things sort of slightly differently than, or like finding sort of holes in a like underserved market, that kind of thing. So my train of thought, it was, so it's an awesome position to be in a situation where I actually get to do all of those things at the same time. That's
kind of combining all those different passions. And
yeah.
One of the things we were discussing earlier, and I know I've talked to a lot of members in the community about this as well, is just the feeling of these events and the feeling of the community as a whole is just so different than a lot of other gaming communities that many of the Sorcery players have been a part of, and really trying to understand why that's different. And from my perspective, kind of hearing a little bit about what you're describing, I think a lot of it is based on the personal philosophy that you're bringing to this, that it's something that you're doing because you really enjoy it, and the passion behind it is really driving you. And then the community itself is kind of attracted to that mindset and potentially bringing in folks that are very similarly oriented in terms of their values and the things that are important to them and what they want to see in a shared experience. What do you think about the community and how it's kind of developed and grown and really turned into this very unique space where most players just haven't really experienced anything as welcoming and as open and supportive as the one that we have?
Yeah, it's a big question, and I can't say I have. Like we didn't quite go into it with sort of here's this like master plan to sort of do this exactly. It's a little bit like things sort of have a life of their own, and it's sort of the places sort of the pieces fall into place, so to speak. But I think there are a couple of things I could bring up would be so competitiveness, and with TCGs, it's for the longest time it was just kind of industry wisdom or sort of conventional wisdom that you had to do this highly competitive sort of skill testing chess-like competition where it's like, okay, you sort of treat the game as math and you get the winner and you get sort of all the glory.
Yeah, kind of creating the most efficient path to victory, but forgetting the experience in between that.
Yeah, so, and a super good example to that would be, well, you have things like the Magic Pro Tour that get pushed a lot, but then when you get a player-created format like Commander that is just, like there's way more players that just want to sort of enjoy the game with friends as opposed to go on the sort of grand Pro Tour, which is sort of a fascinating fact. So that sort of, and it's also an opportunity to, okay, you make a game that is first for the sort of social gatherings, just fun. But with that said, Sorcery is like incredibly deep when it comes to learning curve. So one sort of strange idea I have there is that, so you take MTG and the Pro Tour and the sort of uncontrolled sort of will of the community or something molds it into more of just a social experience and playing Commander. Maybe in 25 years, Sorcery has gone the opposite way, that because of the deep skill and so on, you would have, like, Sorcery would be the game to go for the Pro Tour just because it's the most skill testing game.
Yeah, it's so complex with the spatial elements, the multiple layers of the board, etc.
Yeah. So I'm not exactly saying that this will happen, but it would be a sort of ultimate irony of things.
I would agree, and I love seeing that huge smile on your face as we're discussing this too. To me, it brings me so much joy to hear that excitement and passion, and I agree with you too, that I think that the game itself is an incredibly solid foundation and really fun that elevates this community to kind of problem solve and have that shared experience over it.
Yeah, and the point there also being that you shouldn't, you pick a direction and then you sort of bang your head into the wall there. Like, you should be a little bit open-minded and sort of see where the game itself wants to go.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that I love about your approach to community management in terms of supporting these larger events. So we're recording this video now at SorceryCon, and one of the things that was touched on last night was trying to provide support on the back end, but really allowing these to be player-driven experiences because the players themselves are really driving what they want to see in the event. So really think about how to balance, formally pushing forward your vision, banging your head against the wall, so to speak, and then watching the community kind of organically grow and bring in elements of what they might want to do.
Yeah. So I think the answer is probably a little bit of both, where you also would have you have to make it very simple for store owners that have they just don't have time to sort of learn another game fully and to sort of spend a lot of time building the community. So it's important to have a very fast and easy onboarding experience for them. So maybe they have a package that's okay, they find a good sort of ambassador in the store that can handle that. And it's a very fast and easy, it's very obvious, okay. It basically says how to run tournaments and get it started as well.
For any store owners that might be watching this, do you have any advice for them in terms of how they can get involved in the sorcery community or start to carry your products?
Well, I guess the advice would be in a couple of months we will have a very good way for you to, we will have much better answers and advice for you how to do that.
So if you're watching this, it is the early November 2024. In a couple of months, there's going to be some great answers.
Oh, did I sign up to a deadline? Oh.
Maybe a little bit longer. At some point in the future.
Yes. Yeah.
So thinking about that organized play experience and then kind of transitioning it to larger events like this, what was it like to see almost 500 people in a room just enjoying something that you guys created? Just one of the largest events. This is the third big one of this year. What was that like?
Well, it's a bit of a surreal experience. Not quite sure how to describe it. It's very tangible, I guess you could say. So, coming from computer games, the game I worked on before, Path of Exile, had so many more players, but there's still something special about seeing people sort of physically playing your game, and the type of different people that come and play and enjoy it is also very cool to see. A lot of people being very different to myself as well, so that's kind of amazing.
Yeah. Different in what way?
Different personalities, I would say. It's again one of those things. Like I wish it was. I had this sort of blueprint master plan to make that happen, but there was something about it that makes it. I guess. Well, maybe it's. Part of it, I guess, is the beauty of TCGs, where there is a little bit for everyone, in the sense that everyone has favorite cards, and I guess that's actually a good angle too. Like the way that Sorcery uses different artists, like it doesn't try to put everything in the same style and everything. Like it allows more of the variance, diversity in art and the cards themselves. Yeah. Maybe that's a sort of statement in itself that people can see that it's not just, it doesn't have to be exactly one way. It's sort of inviting for different ways to express yourself in the game.
Yeah, so giving the creative element of it.
Yeah, I'm sort of making this up as I'm thinking now.
Oh, but that's the best answer, right?
It seems to be something to that. Yeah.
Yeah, so really seeing that as a way that people can have personal expression in terms of how they approach the game and approach the experience, and building either a deck with their favorite art or focusing on collecting.
What type of thing they are collecting. Yeah.
No, I love that. And I think the other thing too, games being something that I view as almost like a conduit for other experiences. seeing that room with all those folks, but also realizing that not only are they playing a game, but they're developing genuine friendships and genuine human connections. And coming into these events, I have been traveling for the last year and meeting folks all around the United States and Canada. And it's gotten to the point where coming into large events like this, I might already know 50 or 60 people that I've met at other events, and having this genuine connection with them. What's it like knowing that not only are you creating a fun experience, but you're helping people to connect in a way that they probably never would have been able to before?
Yeah, it's a fascinating thing when you put it like that. I think, just walking around the hall there, it's very nice seeing. Well, you have all these interactions, and you don't really have. Well, everyone is always talking to everyone. You don't have people sort of sitting on the side, browsing their phone, waiting for the next round. Mm-hmm. Now, when you mention it, it's very, there's something about this event, and like you're saying with other events then, that lends itself to that somehow. You're probably better than me at answering it, just because you have seen it in action so much more than me.
Yeah, it's such an interesting phenomenon, and I think being a lifelong TCG player myself, and having a pretty similar background in terms of my early gaming experiences, it's really incredible to see something so different, especially in an age where a lot of communication has transitioned into that more digital format. The level of engagement at these events has been so incredibly high, even to the point where you're meeting folks at events and then seeing them at another event that's 1,000 miles away, and it's like you're best friends even though you just met one time before. And at Gen Con, actually, in the tournament there, every single opponent that I had played, with the exception of one person, was somebody that I had met at a different event, whether it be in Florida or West Virginia or Ohio or Illinois. Being able to connect with folks and then seeing that so many people had that shared interest and bringing them all together in that one space. And it just was a really interesting experience. And that just keeps growing and building as the events move forward.
Yeah, from my... this is kind of business wording, but it seems like Sorcery has a very low churn, in the sense that players, they start to play and then they keep coming back to these events, which seem to match what you're saying. Yeah. Or they like the experience enough to keep coming back, which is of course very good. Again, if you're a little bit business minded, we have the one set per year, and then people you can't afford losing many players if you are doing that, because you would not have so many sort of release booms of new players.
Yeah, so really balancing.
But that's very encouraging from what I'm hearing from you as well there.
Awesome. Yeah, and a lot of folks actually had asked me just to thank you for creating something that has given them the ability to make those connections. So, a lot of the people that I've made friendships with over the last year or so have actually said just pass on the thanks that they have for helping them to create these meaningful relationships.
Yeah, that's actually one thing I got a lot walking around here. People just coming up like, okay, thank you for doing this. But it's a very odd thing to hear, but it's extremely good to, like, it's clearly there's something that made their lives better. More happiness in the world. So.
Yeah. And kind of in line with that, where do you see the game going in the future? I know we had talked a little bit about some of the conceptual things in terms of the event structures and the way those might play out, but where do you see Sorcery heading in the future?
So when it comes to, I can pick up on the artistic thread a little bit. So there's currently what I think is 7 sets that are very sort of distinctly different and have very cool artistic things happening and also game design things happening, obviously I can't talk much about them, but
oh, no worries.
it's yeah, I think people really will like what's happening on that front. Yeah, I'll keep trying to do things that haven't really been done before in the industry, and things that are sort of a little bit too high risk, or sort of seen as a little bit not the thing you're supposed to do as a business, because I kind of like to be a little bit contrarian like that. So I think there's a lot of cool stuff to look forward to there.
Awesome. Well, I know everyone's very excited, and we really appreciate you taking the time to talk more about the game itself, its history, where it's at now, and just the experience of seeing it grow and turn into something that is really meaningful to a lot of people. One of the things that I wanted to just give you the opportunity to, do you have any questions for a player or a community member that are important for you to understand from their perspective?
Well, do you have any advice for how to spread the game? Like we have quite a lot of player growth, but it also feels like there should be 5 times or 10 times as many people that would enjoy the sorcery experience, so to speak.
Yeah, no, that's a really great question. Number one, I'm honored that you think I may have some insight into that as well. But I think the thing for me in terms of watching the events unfold is that we live in an age where everything is expected to have instant gratification. That we've progressed to a point where we're always looking for constant feedback and reinforcement in terms of every little thing we do. But I think that you're doing it right in terms of the slow and steady approach to making sure that the quality of the product and the engagement and experience is really high. And also knowing that there's always going to be someone that's upset with something that you do. I think from a perspective of spreading that, you touched on it a little bit earlier in terms of making the process for getting game stores engaged and on board with the product is something that probably would be really helpful. So thinking about it organically, what we've done in our area is a couple of our community members, Kyle, who's Raz Al Ghul on the Discord, has spearheaded this movement where we'll kind of go to a game store. He'll bring a suitcase full of precons and booster boxes, and he's got 8 play mats, and we just lay them out on the tables and just start playing. And it builds interest. So I think for the community members that are listening and potentially thinking about ways to strategize in terms of growth from the business side of things, just making it accessible for folks. I think you're doing a great job at building that and expanding it. But it's been really cool to see it grow organically. And I think it just takes some time as well. Knowing that a lot of the other game systems that folks might be coming from are very well established and might have decades of product and event experience. You're doing something different and new with a pretty small team as well. I think you had mentioned you have 11 team members currently.
Yes.
Yeah. I think it's incredible to see the growth that you have had and that you're on the right track with it.
Yeah.
Hopefully it was a satisfactory answer.
Great things to consider. Yes.
But it's challenging, I think, because again, back to the point earlier about the investment of time. How do you kind of convince people to try something different, to get them invested in doing something new, when they're also used to doing something similar in a different setting? So finding ways to make it accessible, not just in terms of product availability, but also the cognitive accessibility, reducing the concern that it might be too complex for me to learn or too challenging, or I might not have folks to play with.
Yeah, it's a complex question in the way that it doesn't quite have an easy answer. Like, okay, make super simple decks that you can learn from, because part of sorcery is also the complexity or the sort of wow moment of, well, this is completely crazy. There's this like amoeba that just grows on the playing field.
Yeah, for me, was watching a Pudge Butcher hook one of my minions through a body of water and a giant shark attacking it each step of the way. Like, it's just so cool.
So one approach to things like that would be to, okay, we just take them out to reduce the rule problem. But then if you don't have those stories, then so I guess we keep looking at ways to create those stories, but reducing the friction to get into it.
I think one thing that is beneficial as well, and I just seen an announcement the other day, is that there's a planned reprint for the beta precons. Is that correct?
Yes. So it's one of those decisions that were taken quite a long time ago, but it takes time to get it physically produced and shipped out.
Yeah, so I think that will help to increase the accessibility as well with folks having access to the pre-constructed decks.
Yeah, we also in the next set is, so you know how I talked about the early game development and how it's almost like a sort of pre-con driven development in the sense that you create them first and play them, and then you sort of create a set around the pre-cons. And the next set after Arthurian Legends has been built very much the same way.
Wonderful.
Where we started out with 4 pre-cons. And,
wonderful.
So, I think that one would be great. We have had fantastic results from the play testers early from that. So, hopefully that one will lead to an even bigger influx of new players.
Well, I'm so excited to hear that. You actually had taken the next question right out of my mind in terms of will future sets see those precons? So it sounds like that's actually driving the development process for a lot of those sets as well, and should be something that players can expect to see in the future to help ease them into the game.
Yeah, and partly it's an effect of the team growing with more game designers, and also we're getting better at designing and a bit better and faster at the art production as well. So with Arthurian, I love Arthurian Legends, but it's already since then our capacity of sort of creating more and being able to do both precons and a larger set at the same time have sort of increased. So it will be very interesting to see what people think about that.
Oh, I'm excited. I think people are going to be very excited as well. Any other questions for me before I move on to my final and probably my most important question?
No, I don't think so.
Wonderful.
Okay, let's get the final question.
So there's a huge debate on the Discords, which you might be aware of. Pineapple on pizza or not?
Well, I got into some very healthy lifestyle lately, so I don't eat pizza at all.
Excellent answer. Any final words of wisdom or encouragement for players that might be watching this, whether they're new players who are just getting interested in the game or players that have been there from the beginning?
Well, thank you for playing thank you for spreading the word if you're a seasoned player. And if you're a new player, then, well, I hope you will have fun getting deeper into Sorcery.
Awesome. Well, it's been such an absolute pleasure getting a chance to talk more about the history of the game, your passion for the project itself, where you see it moving in the future. I just want to thank you so much for being here today and sharing those insights with us. If you've liked this video, please feel free to take a look at some of the other ones. The event coverage videos are really phenomenal. And I just want to, again, thank you for taking the time out of your day to join us. See you in the archives.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for having me.